Please take a deep breath and close your eyes for just a moment. Try to remember the very specific smell of your grandmother's kitchen on a Sunday morning. Perhaps it was the scent of paprika mingling with slowly simmering meat soup, or the metallic warm smell of an old iron pressing against stiff cotton sheets. Do you remember the heavy, comforting ticking of the wall clock in the living room, marking the quiet hours of an afternoon? Today, I want to take you on a journey back to a time that feels both like yesterday and a lifetime ago. We are going to open the heavy wooden doors of Hungarian homes from the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s. We will dust off 20 forgotten treasures, everyday objects, and rituals that shaped our childhoods but have now vanished forever. And please stay with me until the very end, because the final memory we will share is perhaps the most magical and slightly chaotic holiday tradition that will surely bring a tear of joy to your eye. Time moved differently back then, did it not? In the decades of our youth, the days felt longer, heavier, and far more meaningful. We lived in an era without the constant nervous buzzing of mobile phones, without the endless rush of instant information. Instead, we had the profound beauty of anticipation. We waited for the postman to deliver a handwritten letter. We waited for Tuesday evenings, even when the television broadcast was famously silent, forcing us to actually turn to one another, to play cards, or simply to talk. Some people today might look back and think that life without modern technology was somehow poorer or emptier, but you and I know the absolute truth. Life was incredibly rich. It was rich in sincerity, in deep conversations over a tiny cup of strong coffee, and in the joy of repairing things rather than throwing them away. The objects in our homes were not just things. They were silent witnesses to our lives, passed down from generation to generation. They were heavy, durable, and required our physical interaction. Let us wander through those familiar rooms once again and rediscover the artifacts of our true emotional wealth. Let us begin our journey with the sound that woke up an entire nation every single morning. If you close your eyes, you can probably still hear the rhythmic metallic sputtering of the traditional aluminium coffee maker, affectionately known as the kociogo. The name itself perfectly mimics the bubbling, popping sound it made as the dark, bitter liquid pushed its way up through the metal spout. In the 1960s and 1970s, making coffee was not a matter of pushing a button on a plastic machine. It was a careful, deliberate morning ritual. You would unscrew the heavy metal base, fill it with cold water, and spoon in the finely ground, dark roasted coffee. The smell of those grounds alone is enough to transport you back in time. Then you would place it on the gas stove, watching the blue flames lick the sides of the metal. You had to wait patiently, listening closely. When the gentle hissing turned into that iconic, aggressive bubbling sound, you knew the espresso was ready. The aroma that filled the kitchen was sharp, roasted, and profoundly comforting. Families would gather around the small kitchen table, sipping this incredibly strong black drink from tiny porcelain cups. It was the fuel of the working class, the perfect companion to a morning cigarette, and the sacred start to a day. We did not have fancy lattes or imported beans, but that strong, honest cup of kociogo coffee tasted like home, like safety, and like the beginning of endless possibilities. Now, step into the dining room on a lazy Sunday afternoon, where the centerpiece of the table was never a plastic bottle, but a heavy, majestic soda siphon. The Zodas siphon was an absolute staple in every Hungarian household. Some were made of thick, ribbed glass encased in a protective metal mesh, while later models were sleek aluminium cylinders. Making soda water was an interactive experience. You had to take the empty metal cartridges to the local grocery store to exchange them for full ones. Back at home, you would fill the bottle with cold tap water, insert the small gas cartridge into the handle, and screw it in tightly. Then came the magical moment. the loud hiss as the carbon dioxide rushed into the water, transforming it into sharp, sparkling soda. We used it to make the famous Hungarian frocks, mixing the bubbly water with crisp white wine on warm summer evenings. Children loved pushing the heavy lever, watching the pressurized water shoot into their glasses to mix with sweet raspberry syrup. The soda siphon was heavy in your hands, a solid piece of domestic engineering that brought families together around the dinner table, sharing laughter and stories over a perfectly mixed, sparkling drink. Speaking of sweet drinks, let us remember the ultimate taste of childhood in the 1960s, the legendary Bambi soda. Long before international cola brands arrived on our shelves, Bambi was the king of soft drinks. It came in a distinct, slightly ribbed glass bottle with a rusty metal crown cap that you had to pry off. The drink itself was a sticky, vibrant orange color, though it tasted very little like actual oranges. It had a unique, synthetic, but absolutely beloved sweet flavor that coated your tongue and left you buzzing with sugar. Drinking a Bambi was a special occasion. You might get one at the local presso, sitting on a wobbly metal chair on the terrace, feeling like a grown-up. Or perhaps your parents bought it as a rare treat during a trip to Lake Balaton. The glass bottle was heavy, and it felt cool against your cheek on a sweltering July afternoon. We did not care about artificial colors or sugar content back then. For a child in those days, a bottle of Bambi was the taste of freedom, of summer holidays, and of pure, unadulterated joy that you wanted to make last as long as humanly possible. If you look up at the walls of a traditional Hungarian kitchen from that era, you will undoubtedly remember the embroidered wall protectors, the falisfedo. These were rectangular pieces of white linen, painstakingly hand-embroidered with blue or red thread, hung directly above the stove or the kitchen table. Bright practical purpose was to protect the whitewashed walls from cooking grease and splashing soup, but they were so much more than that. They were the heart of the kitchen. Each one featured a charming, often naive illustration of domestic life, a happy couple, a busy housewife, or a blooming garden. More importantly, they carried embroidered proverbs and rhyming life lessons. They reminded us that where there is faith, there is love, or playfully scolded husbands to appreciate their wives' cooking. These tapestries were stitched by grandmothers and mothers during long winter evenings by the light of a single lamp. Running your fingers over the raised threads, you could feel the love and care stitched into every word. They gave the kitchen a soul, turning a simple cooking space into a warm, deeply personal sanctuary where the family gathered for every meal. Let us move into the living room, where a large, heavy wooden box occupied the most prominent corner. This was the Videoton television set, a magnificent piece of furniture as much as it was a technological marvel. It took a few minutes to warm up after you pushed the heavy, clicking power button. Slowly, a glowing dot in the center of the screen would expand into a fuzzy black and white image, accompanied by the distinct smell of warm electronic tubes. In those days, watching television was a communal event. Neighbors who did not yet own a set would come over, bringing a plate of cookies or a bottle of wine to watch the evening news, the Saturday night variety shows, or the beloved Tankdal-festival. And let us not forget the mandatory decoration. Every television set had a meticulously crocheted white lace doily draped over the top, often with a small porcelain figurine resting proudly in the center. We did not mind that there was only one channel, or that the broadcast completely shut down on Mondays. That silence gave us back our evenings, forcing us to talk, to read, or to play board games under the warm glow of the living room lamp. Resting right on top of that television, or carefully arranged inside the glass display cabinet, were the delicate porcelain figurines, the porcelain nipek. Every respectable Hungarian household had a collection of these fragile treasures. There was the graceful ballerina tying her shoes, the majestic deer, the playful borzoi dog, or the couple in traditional folk dress. Some were genuine Herend or Jolnai pieces, while most were affordable imitations, but they were all treated with the utmost reverence. As children, we were strictly forbidden from playing with them. They were only to be looked at, admired through the glass. The weekly dusting ritual was a matter of high anxiety. Mothers and grandmothers would carefully lift each figurine, wipe it down with a soft cloth, and place it back in its exact designated spot. These porcelain figures were symbols of order, of striving for beauty and elegance even in modest homes. They caught the afternoon sunlight, casting tiny, colourful reflections on the wallpaper. They were the silent guardians of the living room, representing a sense of permanence and delicate beauty in a rapidly changing world. Back in the kitchen, humming a constant, comforting tune, stood the indestructible Lehel refrigerator. It was usually white, short, and incredibly bulky, featuring a thick metal handle that required a solid, purposeful pull to open. When you managed to yank the heavy door open, a rush of cold air greeted you, along with a distinct smell of stored vegetables, smoked sausage, and cold butter. Inside, at the very top, was a tiny freezer compartment that was chronically encased in thick, solid ice. Defrosting the Lehel was an all-day family event. We would unplug the roaring machine, place pots of hot water inside, and wait for the glacier to melt, catching the dripping water with an arsenal of kitchen towels. But despite its flaws, the Lehel refrigerator was an absolute tank. It lasted for decades, faithfully keeping our food fresh without any complex digital displays or delicate sensors. It was a testament to an era when things were manufactured to endure. We did not replace our appliances every few years. We lived with them, we maintained them, and they became noisy, dependable members of the household. For moments of personal escape, we turned to the beloved Sokol radio. Encased in a sturdy, stitched brown leather cover, this small, heavy, rectangular device was a window to the outside world. It operated on a bulky rectangular battery that lasted forever. The process of tuning the Sokol was an art form. You would slowly turn the stiff plastic dial, listening through the static, the high-pitched squeals, and the fading frequencies. At night, under the covers, we would carefully search for the forbidden broadcasts of Radio-Free Europe, straining our ears to hear the news and Western music through the heavy jamming signals. During the day, it sat on the kitchen counter, broadcasting the noon bell chimes or the Sunday afternoon radio plays. The sound of a Sokol radio was never perfectly clear. It was a warm, slightly muffled, scratchy sound that felt intimate and personal. Carrying that radio out to the garden or to the beach at Lake Balaton made you feel connected to the entire country. A tiny, magical box that brought voices, music, and imagination directly into the palm of your hand. When Saturday morning arrived, the peace of the house was shattered by the roaring engine of the Raketa vacuum cleaner. True to its name, which means rocket, this appliance looked exactly like a metallic torpedo from a vintage science fiction movie. It was heavy, cylindrical, and rolled on small metal runners that scratched across the wooden parquet floors. Turning it on was like starting a jet engine. It was incredibly loud, terrifying every dog and cat within a 1-mile radius. But the Raketa was powerful and virtually unbreakable. The exhaust blew a strong gust of warm, slightly dusty-smelling air out the back, which we children loved to sit in front of, feeling the breeze on our faces. Cleaning the house with the Raketa was physical labor. You had to drag the heavy metal body from room to room, wrestling with the stiff fabric hose. Yet there was something deeply satisfying about that noise. When the Raketa was roaring, you knew the house was being properly cleaned, preparing for the quiet, spotless sanctuary of a Sunday afternoon. The bathroom had its own industrial monster, the famous Haidu washing machine. Before the era of automatic front-loading machines, doing the laundry was a physically demanding, steamy, all-day affair. The haidu was a large, round, white metal tub that stood on little legs. You had to manually fill it with hot water using a hose attached to the bathtub faucet. Once turned on, a large plastic disc at the bottom would violently agitate the water, swirling the clothes in a soapy, chaotic whirlpool. The entire bathroom would fill with thick, fragrant steam, smelling strongly of ammo soap and clean linen. When the washing cycle was done, the real work began. Mothers used a large wooden pair of tongs to fish the scalding hot, heavy, wet clothes out of the boiling water. Then came the manual wringer, feeding the soaking garments between two rubber rollers, turning the crank by hand to squeeze the water out. It was exhausting work, but nothing compared to the pride of hanging those brilliant, stiff, white sheets out in the yard, smelling of pure soap and fresh air. Sunday mornings in a Hungarian home were defined by another intense piece of machinery, the kukta, or pressure cooker. This heavy cast aluminium pot was essential for making the traditional Sunday meat soup in a fraction of the usual time. But to a child, the kukta was a terrifying object. Once locked and placed on the flame, the pressure inside would build until the little metal valve on top began to spin and spit violently. It hissed and screamed, releasing jets of hot steam that danced toward the ceiling. Mothers handled it with expert bravery, knowing exactly when to lower the heat. We were always warned to never, ever touch it or try to open it while it was whistling. But oh, the reward was worth the terror. When it was finally safe to open, a cloud of magnificent steam would rise, carrying the rich golden smell of beef bones, carrots, celery, and parsley. The kukta transformed tough cuts of meat into tender perfection, ensuring that the sacred Sunday lunch was always ready right as the midday bells began to ring on the radio. After that heavy Sunday lunch, if we were very lucky, a special treat would appear from the depths of the pantry. It was the legendary Maxganiav, or cat's tongue chocolate. Produced by the famous Sharenci chocolate factory, this was not your everyday candy. It was a symbol of elegance and celebration. The box itself was a piece of art, often featuring a charming illustration of kittens. Inside, resting on delicate, crinkly paper, were thin, elongated strips of solid milk or dark chocolate, shaped perfectly like the tongue of a cat. We rarely bought Maxganiav just for ourselves. It was the universal gift of gratitude in Hungary. You bought a box for the doctor who treated your fever, for the teacher at the end of the school year, or for a gracious host. When you finally got to eat one, you did not chew it. You placed the smooth, curved chocolate on your tongue and let it melt slowly, savoring the rich, creamy cocoa flavor. It felt luxurious, a tiny, affordable piece of sophistication that made any ordinary afternoon feel like a grand holiday. For a more savory, everyday staple, one only had to look in the refrigerator door to find the iconic metal tubes of pyros arani. Translating to red gold, this bright red, salty paprika paste was the secret weapon of Hungarian cuisine. It came in an aluminum tube, looking exactly like a tube of toothpaste, which sometimes led to very unfortunate morning mistakes in the dark. Squeezing that thick, crimson paste onto a slice of fresh white bread, smeared with pork lard and topped with purple onions, was a culinary revelation. It was intensely salty, rich with the flavor of crushed peppers, and had a slightly gritty texture that we loved. We squeezed it into stews, onto boiled eggs, or just ate it straight on bread when we came home hungry from playing outside. Rolling up the metal tube from the bottom as it emptied, trying to squeeze out every last drop of that precious red gold, was a daily ritual. It was the fiery, salty essence of Hungarian flavor, packaged in a simple metal tube that sat on every kitchen shelf across the nation. For the youth growing up in the 1970s and 1980s, pocket calendars, or kartjenapdar, were more than just a way to keep track of the date. They were a massive cultural phenomenon and a serious collector's item. These small, glossy cardboard cards featured the calendar year on the back, but the front was where the magic happened. They displayed everything from popular singers and beautiful landscapes to advertisements for Trauby soda, state insurance companies, and even public safety warnings. Every child had a thick stack of them held together by a rubber band. We would bring them to school, trading our duplicates with friends during recess. I will trade you 2 Scala department store girls for 1 Omega band card. They had a specific, glossy, printed smell when they were brand new. Adults kept them neatly tucked inside their leather wallets, marking important birthdays with a tiny blue pen. Looking through a stack of old pocket calendars today is like flipping through a miniature, colourful encyclopedia of our youth, capturing the exact aesthetic and desires of the era. The atmosphere of a Hungarian living room in the 1960s was often accompanied by a specific scent, the blue smoke of a feshka cigarette. Feshka, meaning swallow, was the iconic unfiltered and later filtered cigarette of the working class. The packaging was instantly recognizable, a simple light blue box featuring the silhouette of a flying swallow. In those days, smoking was not banished to the balcony. It happened around the kitchen table, over intense political discussions, or while playing a long game of cards. The smell of feshka tobacco mingling with the aroma of strong Kotiogo coffee is the defining olfactory memory of many childhoods. You remember the sound of a wooden match striking the side of the matchbox, the brief flare of sulfur, and the deep inhalation. Even if you never smoked, the Feshka brand represented the adult world. It was a time when neighbours sat together, sharing a pack, talking through their struggles and joys, enveloped in a haze of strong tobacco and deep, genuine camaraderie. Learning the value of money was a slow, physical process, symbolized perfectly by the takarekoniv, the savings booklet issued by the National Savings Bank. This small brown or blue booklet was given to almost every child. Instead of digital transfers, we saved money using physical stamps. When you got a little pocket money from your grandparents, you went to the post office or the bank to buy a colourful stamp worth 10 or 20 forints. You would lick the back of the stamp, tasting the dry glue, and carefully press it into the empty squares of your savings booklet. Watching those pages fill up was a lesson in patience and discipline. We were saving up for a new bicycle, for a camping trip, or even dreaming of one day buying a Trabant car. The takarekoniv usually sat in the top drawer of the parents' desk, a tangible record of our hopes for the future. It taught us that good things required time and consistent effort, a beautiful philosophy that feels entirely lost in today's world of instant gratification and digital credit. When it came to fashion and physical education, there was only one shoe that ruled the schoolyards, the legendary Tissa shoe. Specifically, the classic blue canvas sneaker with the distinctive white T logo on the side. In the 1970s and 1980s, if you walked into a school gymnasium, the air smelled of floor wax and the rubber soles of Tissa shoes squeaking on the parquet. Originally designed for athletes, they quickly became the everyday uniform for the youth. They were not particularly orthopedic, and the canvas would fade after a long summer of playing football on concrete, but they were ours. Tying the thick white laces on a crisp September morning meant you were ready for the new school year. The Tissa shoe was a symbol of Hungarian industry, a sturdy, reliable companion that carried us through scraped knees, first dates, and endless hours of playing tag in the neighborhood blocks. Even today, seeing that simple white logo evokes a rush of adrenaline and the memory of endless summer afternoons. In the late 1970s, a sudden furry crash swept through Hungarian bedrooms. The arrival of the Monchichi or Monchichi doll. This little monkey-like creature with soft brown fur, a hard plastic face and freckles captured the hearts of everyone. What made it so special was its little plastic hand, shaped perfectly so the dog could suck its own thumb. Getting a monchichi was a major event. Initially, they were brought in secretly from the West by lucky relatives who could travel to Vienna, making them an incredible status symbol in the schoolyard. Later, they appeared in the legendary Scala department stores. Girls and boys alike cherished these dolls. We would brush their soft fur, dress them in tiny knitted clothes made by our grandmothers, and sleep with them tucked under our arms. The monchichi was a soft, comforting presence, a small piece of global pop culture that managed to sneak its way behind the Iron Curtain, bringing massive smiles to a generation of Hungarian children. No Hungarian home was complete without a properly stocked camera, the cold, dark pantry. Stepping into the pantry was like entering a sacred vault of sustenance. It was usually unheated, smelling of cool plaster, dried garlic, and dust. The wooden shelves were lined with absolute precision, holding rows and rows of glass jars. There were home-canned yellow peaches glowing like captured sunshine, ruby red cherry compotes, and tall jars of pickled cucumbers floating with dill and garlic. Every jar had a small paper label, marked with the year and the neat cursive handwriting of a mother or grandmother. Preparing these jars was the exhausting work of late summer, boiling fruits, sealing lids, and wrapping them in thick blankets to cool slowly. The pantry was our insurance policy against the long, dark winters. When January brought freezing winds, opening a jar of summer apricots was a moment of pure magic. The camera represented security, hard work, and the deep-rooted knowledge that a family who preserves together will always survive the cold. And finally, we arrive at the most unforgettable, slightly chaotic, and deeply touching memory of all: the Christmas mirror carp swimming in the bathroom bathtub. In the days leading up to Christmas Eve, fathers would return from the market carrying a large, heavy plastic bag filled with water and a live tukaponti. Because refrigerators were small and fresh fish was a holiday luxury, the only way to keep the traditional fish soup ingredient fresh was to let it live in the family bathtub. For 3 or 4 days, taking a bath was strictly forbidden. As children, we would kneel beside the cold, white enamel tub, watching the heavy, golden brown fish swim lazily in the shallow water. We gave it a name, we talked to it, and we fed it breadcrumbs. It became a temporary, beloved pet. Of course, this made the inevitable Christmas Eve preparation incredibly traumatic and deeply emotional. But that bathtub carp was the ultimate symbol of the Hungarian holiday season. It was absurd, it was inconvenient, but it brought a sense of wild, living magic into the sterile bathroom, creating a memory so vivid, so strange, and so beautiful that we will carry it in our hearts forever. As we close the door on these memories, it becomes clear that we do not merely miss the heavy glass soda siphons, the roaring vacuum cleaners, or the whistling pressure cookers. What we truly ache for is the feeling of our youth. We miss the slow, deliberate pace of a Sunday afternoon, the smell of our grandmother's kitchen, and the undivided attention of our families gathered around a single television screen. These 20 forgotten treasures were not just objects. They were the physical anchors of our relationships, demanding our patience, our care, and our physical presence. They remind us of a time when life was harder on the hands, but perhaps much softer on the soul. If this journey back in time brought a smile to your face or a warm tear to your eye, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video. It helps us keep these precious histories alive. And now, I want to turn to you, my friend. Which of these 20 treasures sparked the strongest memory for you? Did your family keep a live carp in the bathtub before Christmas, or do you remember the exact smell of a fresh box of Muchkin Yelv chocolate? Please, Share your most beautiful childhood stories in the comments below. Let us build a community of shared memories. Thank you for walking down memory lane with me today, and may you always hold the warmth of the past in your heart.